Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are finally going to be covering the newest album from Carolyn Spence called Mint Condition. So we've reached the part of the year where the major releases have started to seriously dry up, and I'm stuck poring over what I've missed. Yes, I was thinking about covering Lady Antebellum or Madeon, but neither were particularly interesting in sound or content, and that really is the reason why I created the Trailing Edge in the first place, and how plans for next year will be able to rectify this sort of situation. Just stay tuned for an announcement mid-December about that. So, alright, why not go back and cover an indie country album that really intrigued me from way earlier in the year? That sounds fun, right? Well, okay, here's the thing. When I first started researching for this album and went back to listen to Carolyn Spence's 2015 project Somehow, I was not really all that impressed. Yeah, the vocals were pretty, but the production was very sedate and low-key, and I wasn't really wowed by some of the writing, and thus it took me months to really work up the energy to dig deeper. And yet I'm also kind of really glad I did, because 2017 Spades and Roses is genuinely excellent, with way better vocal positioning, writing that had developed an idiosyncratic cadence and style, and several deeper notches of nuance in the emotionality, and production that had taken its spare, organic country vibe with just enough reverb and multi-tracking to accentuate some real striking melodies. Not quite as warm or strident as, say, Courtney Marie Andrews, but absolutely playing in the same ballpark of quality. It was one of those projects that really had me kicking myself I couldn't have found it 2 years ago, but it made me absolutely certain that I had to cover Mint Condition eventually, this album, this year. So, okay, what do we get? So, this is the sort of project that, I'll admit, had to take a while to really grow on me. Mostly because its sound and approach isn't quite as immediate or direct as many of her peers. And I wouldn't quite say there's an immediate slam dunk in the same way that Softball was in the last album. But Mint Condition is a pretty great project, provided you give it the time and patience to really take in some of the fine emotive details. Perhaps not among the top tier of indie country releases in 2019, but it's absolutely worth your attention. This is some great stuff. I'm finally happy that I'm covering it. So let's get my main criticisms out of the way first, namely that as a whole, it's a project that can run a little short of momentum and gets kind of lethargic quickly. Now, part of this is a factor of Carolyn Spence's husky delivery, which is emotive but can be a little bit soft-spoken at times. If you're paying attention, there's a lot of subtle nuance to her delivery. She really is an excellent performer, but it's not hard to find yourself drifting off a little bit thanks to the slower tempos overall and the more atmospheric production, where the melodies are often pretty but generally spare, sometimes lacking that foundational melodic motif to really hold a little bit more attention. And immediately the comparison to an act like Courtney Marie Andrews, it does spring to mind again, especially given her tremendous emotive range, but she also brings a slightly wider breadth of tones behind her. The atmosphere can get a little smokier, a little more jagged, and there's nearly always a more burnished sense of warmth that I'm not quite sure Carolyn Spence has here. And yet, you know what, that does kind of make a certain amount of sense. While both Mint Condition and May Your Kindness Remain are searching albums, there is a sense that Spence is a little bit more downbeat and lonely on her journey, so it's going to be a little cooler. And while there is hope, her wistful expectations are a little more tempered. Now, granted, I say this while following that songs like Song About a City and Long Haul, they're probably the more underwhelming cuts for me here, as despite some nice bass interplay on the former song and some organ fleshing out the latter, they feel a little by the numbers in terms of delivery and tone, especially in comparison with the more jagged edges and scuzz sliding in behind Who's Gonna Make My Mistakes, or the slightly darker opening of What You Don't Know off that sharper kick drum. But you know what? I'd be lying if I said that the best instrumental moments didn't come through on the ballads. Spare, touched with some reverb to let the guitars or pianos linger in the background off the acoustic guitar. They do a striking job emphasizing the loneliness of this album, from the long, lingering coos behind Sometimes a Woman is an Island, to the very beautiful piano touches anchoring Sit Here and Love Me and Wait on the Wine. And that's not even touching on some of the richer strings backing on Till You Find One, which comes probably closest to a Caitlin Smith-esque pop country sound, but you know what? It's one that Carolyn Spence can sell pretty convincingly. She's got the maturity to anchor a track like that and sell the drama. Hell, I even kind of appreciated the rougher edges of guitar that crept in behind Angels or Los Angeles. It's definitely texture that counterbalances her voice a lot better than I expected. But again, this is an album that rewards attention and sinking into that atmosphere, paying attention to the details, because when you get into her writing, it's real easy to get sucked in. She's described this album as one in various states of searching, although where that search might take her, cat can be loaded indeed. Hell, the opening track seems to imply at least some form of cheating took place and a lingering sense of panic and guilt at this connection. And while the scene being painted is kind of ambiguous in terms of the partners and who she's talking to, there is plenty left in the subtext to imply infidelity. And there's a similar vibe to the conscious mistakes that are being made on, well, who's gonna make my mistakes? Where she's tipsy, she can't afford to be tipsy at this bar, and listening to some guy who's a lot more interested in serving his own ego than satisfying her. But when you're lonely or desperate enough, you're gonna justify that attention in your art to fill that deeper void. Indeed, that context and self-awareness that her art is always a factor in the storytelling is a nice touch to songs like Song About a City, where the ex is occupying more of her thoughts beyond just telling stories on the road. Even as both Long Haul or Angels or Los Angeles seem to imply she's finding some sort of fulfillment on those lonely roads, or at least trying to convince herself that she is. And that's a very telling bit of subtext on this project too. Because while you can tell there is some resistance in what she wants to help fill that void, especially if it's another person and feeling that's worth of her love. Look at Who Are You, where as much as she's been searching to find someone who questions her own brand of self-care or self-destruction and then wants to be there for her, especially if there is something between them. And when you also include the mature relationship songs like Sometimes a Woman is an Island and Sit There and Love Me, where she knows that all she really needs is the moment of trust and support and care while in her own space. Yeah, it's potent. It's also why Wait for the Wine is so wistful, but kind of heartbreaking at the same time. She knows that there's something real between them, but has to let her inhibitions go to let herself realize it, not bury it away. But you know what? For the lingering loneliness of Till You Find One, where an active search can be utterly fruitless, she can't throw this chance away. It's her shot, she's gotta take it. And while I'm not really crazy about the title track as a closing song and as a love song, it does fit the lived-in, mature arc to stick the landing of the album, so yeah, it fits too. Sum it all up though, yes, I know I'm very late talking about this album, but I'm really glad I did, because it's really well crafted and it's likable for indie country. I don't quite love it, or I'm sure that outside of a few specific tracks they'll be among the best of the year, but setting this sort of mature, thoughtful, occasionally heartbreaking vibe, Carolyn Spence just really nailed it, so I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 and a big recommendation. Not really surprised to see this fly under the radar for a lot of folks. Hell, it did for me for a long time. But you know what? If you want to get a chance, oh yeah, go ahead. Check this out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I'm late to this. Not really sorry for it. It happens. I've had a busy schedule. But if you want to buy or stream the album, and I highly recommend you do, links down there below. And I got the poll up there. I am curious where people are going to fall on this, especially in comparison with Carolyn Spence's last album, which I think has slightly stronger highlights, but this is more consistent and holds together a little better overall. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you're looking for other album reviews or the newest episode of Billboard Breakdown, links in the card right over there. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.